My mother-in-law held my newborn son and looked me straight in the eye. Men need variety. A smart wife knows when to ignore it. My husband was still out in the hallway texting my cousin. I didn't argue. I smiled, thanked her, and let it pass. Over the next 6 weeks, I played the part perfectly, keeping the house warm, the meals ready, the peace intact. Even at 3 a.m. with a crying baby in my arms, they thought I was coping. They thought I didn't know. What they didn't realize was that I was watching, waiting, and planning something they would never recover from. Have you ever known the truth and had to pretend you didn't? Then you understand this story, because the hardest part isn't the betrayal. It's the smile. But I should back up. Because this didn't start in that delivery room. It started 3 months earlier, at a Sunday dinner, in the house I was still paying the mortgage on, with a pot roast in the oven and a baby pressing against my ribs. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I work at a private practice in Charlotte, North Carolina. For 10 years, I have sat across from people whose relationships are falling apart and helped them find a way through or a way out. I can read a micro-expression from across a room. I can tell when someone is lying by the way they touch their own neck. I can measure the difference between a real smile and a performed one in fractions of a second. And I missed it in my own kitchen. Or maybe I didn't miss it. Maybe I just loved him too much to write it down. Garrett and I had been married 5 years. He was in pharmaceutical sales, the kind of man who could walk into a room full of strangers and make every single one of them feel like the most important person there. That was what drew me to him in the first place. I study people for a living, and he was the first person I couldn't quite figure out. I mistook that for depth. I think now it might have just been practice. I was 7 months pregnant with our first child. We lived in a 3-bedroom house in Ballantyne, nice neighborhood, good schools, the kind of street where people wave from their driveways. We were still paying the mortgage on 2 incomes, still splitting the grocery bill, still arguing about whether to refinish the deck or wait another year. We were not rich. We were comfortable, which in Charlotte means you're one layoff away from not being comfortable. Sharon, that's my mother-in-law, had suggested my cousin Jessica come help out around the house. "You shouldn't be on your feet so much, sweetheart," she said. And it sounded like kindness. It sounded like family. Jessica is 4 years younger than me, Aunt Caroline's daughter. We grew up together in Raleigh birthday sleepovers, prom dress shopping, calling each other at midnight after bad dates. When I got pregnant, she drove down from Greensboro with a trunk full of onesies and a handmade card that said, "Best Mom Loading." I cried in the driveway for 10 minutes, so when she started coming over on Sundays, it felt natural. Warm, she'd help me chop onions while Sharon set the table and Garrett grilled corn on the back deck. The house smelled like rosemary and charcoal, and something I thought was happiness. That first Sunday, Jessica carried a plate out to Garrett on the deck. I was standing at the kitchen window, wooden spoon in hand, and I saw it. Their fingers overlapped on the rim of the plate. Not an accident, I can tell the difference. An accidental touch lasts a quarter of a second. This one lasted closer to 1.5. Their eyes met during the transfer, and he smiled at her in a way that I recognized from my therapy room, but had never seen directed at anyone in my own house. Not a polite smile, a smile of recognition, of private knowing. It lasted 2 seconds, maybe less. My training kicked in before my emotions did. I cataloged it. Prolonged tactile contact, mutual gaze with Duchenne markers, synchronous microlean, then my denial kicked in right after. "You're projecting, Meredith. You see affairs every day. Pregnancy hormones amplify everything. This is your cousin. This is your husband. This is a plate of corn." I turned back to the stove, stirred the gravy. After dinner, I washed the dishes. Jessica dried. She talked about a guy she'd been seeing. Nothing serious, she said. Super complicated. I asked follow-up questions the way a good cousin does, the way a good therapist does. When she left, she hugged me and whispered, "You're going to be such a good mom, Mary." I believed her. I think part of her even meant it. That night, Garrett fell asleep before me. He slept on his side, facing the wall. His phone sat on the nightstand, screen down. It used to sit screen up. I didn't know when it changed a week ago, a month, but I noticed it the way I notice everything. Late and all at once. I lay in the dark with my hand on my belly, feeling my son shift under my ribs, and I asked myself the question that every woman in my therapy chair has asked me at some point. Am I imagining this? I didn't answer. I told myself I was wrong. I told myself for 3 more weeks. Every morning I woke up next to him, felt the warmth of his back against mine, and chose the version of us that still made sense. Because the alternative, the version where my husband was touching my cousin and my mother-in-law was setting the table for it, that version was too ugly for a woman who fixes things for a living. That version meant I couldn't fix my own life, and I was not ready to be that woman. Not yet. Have you ever seen something you weren't supposed to see? Not a text, not a photo, just a look, a pause, a hand that lingered 1 second too long and spent weeks telling yourself it meant nothing. Then you know exactly why the next 3 weeks were the longest of my life. The next 3 weeks taught me something they don't cover in graduate school. That the hardest person to diagnose is yourself. I watched. Not like a detective, I didn't go through his drawers or check his credit card statements. I watched like a therapist, which is worse, if you think about it, because a detective looks for proof. A therapist looks for patterns, and patterns, once you start seeing them, don't stop. Garrett started going to the gym 4 evenings a week. He'd come home around 8, shower immediately, kiss my forehead, ask about the baby. Sweet, attentive, but his hair was damp and his gym bag was dry. I noticed, because I noticed things like that, the gap between what someone says they did and what the evidence actually shows. In my office, I call it narrative inconsistency. In my kitchen, standing there in maternity leggings with my hand on my lower back, I called it nothing. I filed it away and kept stirring the pasta. Jessica came over more often. Tuesdays and Thursdays, sometimes Saturdays. She'd bring groceries, help fold laundry, sit on the couch and rub my swollen feet while we watched reality TV. She was genuinely helpful. I want to be clear about that. She drove me to my 32-week checkup when Garrett had a client dinner. She organized the nursery closet by size. She cried when we found out the baby was a boy. I don't think she was faking all of it. That's what makes it so much harder to talk about. If she had been cold, if she had been distant, I could file her under sociopath and move on. But she was warm. She was present. She was 70% the cousin I'd always known and 30% something I couldn't name yet. One Thursday evening, Jessica stayed for dinner. Garrett was home. The 3 of us sat around the kitchen table eating takeout Thai pad see-ew for him. Green curry for her, tom kha for me, because the baby liked coconut. Normal, easy, except Jessica had 2 glasses of wine, and somewhere between the second glass and the fortune cookies, she got quiet. She looked at me, really looked, and said, "Mary, you deserve someone who... you deserve better than." She stopped, took a breath, then smiled. The kind of smile that rearranges itself mid-expression. "I mean, you deserve everything good. That's all." Garrett reached for the soy sauce. His hand was steady. He didn't look up. I said, "That's sweet, Jess. Thank you." And I filed that too. Not under evidence. Under things I'll understand later. It was the following Tuesday that I decided to test something. Not because I was ready to know, because I couldn't stop myself. We were on the couch after dinner. Garrett was rubbing my feet, which he'd started doing more often since my 7th month. I told him about a client invented, composited, but believable, a husband who'd been having an affair, a wife who found out. The sad part, I said, keeping my voice clinical, neutral, is that she said she saw the signs for months but kept rationalizing them. I waited. In my therapy room, this is the moment I watch closely the 3-second window after a loaded statement where the face tells the truth before the mouth catches up. Garrett didn't flinch, didn't look away, didn't touch his neck or shift his weight. Instead, he turned to me with a look of soft concern and said, "That's heavy, Mur. Are you okay? You've seemed tense lately. I worry about you taking on so many couples in crisis while you're this pregnant. Maybe you should cut your caseload. I can pick up the slack financially for a few months." He delivered it perfectly. Warm, generous, caring, and my stomach dropped. Not because he'd failed the test, because he'd passed it. He had turned my question, my probe, my carefully placed diagnostic tool into evidence that I was the one struggling, that my perception was the problem. In one smooth sentence, he had reframed my suspicion as professional burnout. In my field, we call that gaslighting. But it doesn't feel like a textbook term when it's happening to you on your own couch, with your husband's hands on your feet. It feels like, maybe he's right. Maybe you are too tired. Maybe you do see betrayal everywhere because you swim in it 40 hours a week. Maybe you should cut back. I almost believed him. That's the part that still makes me sick. It was a Thursday 8 days later, 2:17 in the morning when I found it. Garrett was asleep. Deep asleep. The kind where his breathing goes slow and his jaw unclenches. I got up to use the bathroom 34 weeks pregnant. I was up every 90 minutes, and on my way back, his phone lit up on the nightstand. A notification. I didn't plan to look, but the screen was bright in the dark room, and my eyes adjusted before my conscience did. One message. From Jessica. A red heart emoji. That's all. No words. Just, in a thread that was not the family group chat. In a thread that should not have existed. I set the phone back down. Screen facing up, exactly the way I'd found it. My hands were steady, which surprised me. I walked to the bathroom, closed the door, locked it. I sat down on the tile floor. The cold went through my pajama pants immediately. February in Charlotte. The bathroom floor like a sheet of ice. My belly pressed against my thighs. My son shifted inside me, adjusting to the new position, the way babies do, completely unaware, completely trusting. I didn't cry right away. I sat there and I thought, very clearly, one emoji. That's all it took. Not paragraphs of confession, not a lipstick stain or a hotel receipt. One red heart in a thread that should not have existed. And my entire life rearranged itself in the time it took to set his phone back down. Then I cried. Not loudly. Garrett was a light sleeper when he wanted to be. I pressed my face into a towel and I cried the way you cry when the thing you've been running from finally catches you. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. Just a woman on a bathroom floor at 2 a.m. with a belly full of baby and a marriage full of lies. I don't know how long I sat there. For the first time in my career, I forgot to count. And then he kicked. Hard. The kind of kick that makes you gasp. The kind that feels less like a flutter and more like a demand. Like a fist against a wall. Like someone saying, "I'm still here. Don't forget I'm here." I put both hands on my belly. Pressed gently. He kicked again, softer this time, as if to say, "Okay, I just needed you to know." For 30 seconds, nothing existed except the weight of him against my ribs. Not the phone, not the emoji, not the husband breathing evenly in the next room, not the cousin who rubbed my feet on Tuesdays and texted red hearts to my husband at 2 a.m. Just my son, just me. Just the sound of my own breathing coming back under control. 30 seconds. That's all I got. Then the bathroom floor was cold again, and the towel was wet against my face, and the truth was still the truth. I stood up, washed my face, looked in the mirror. The woman looking back was not the woman who had walked in. Not stronger, not braver, just emptier. And she had a son who was going to need a mother who could stand up in the morning and pretend everything was fine. So that's what I did. I walked back to bed, lay down next to the man who was sleeping with my cousin, pulled the comforter up to my chin, closed my eyes, and did not sleep for the rest of the night. Have you ever lain next to someone and realized that the space between your bodies was no longer just inches, it was everything you couldn't say? Then you know what that night felt like, and you know it was only the beginning. I went to work the next morning. I don't know why I thought I could. My 9 o'clock was a couple working through infidelity, Dan and Sheila. Married 12 years. I'd been seeing them for 8 weeks. We were making progress. I opened my mouth to say something about transparency, about how trust isn't a switch you flip back on, it's a muscle you rebuild. But what came out was, trust is built through consistent, transparent behavior over. And I heard myself. Really heard myself. Because I sounded like a woman standing in a burning house telling other people how to install smoke detectors. My voice cracked. Dan caught it, the look of someone who suddenly realizes their therapist is a person. I excused myself, walked past the hallway, out the back door, across the parking lot, and into my Honda CR-V. I sat in the driver's seat with my forehead against my knuckles and said out loud to no one, "What kind of therapist can't read her own husband?" The parking lot was mostly empty. Just my car and Dr. Reeves's Subaru. No one heard me say it again, quieter. I charge people $160 an hour, and I missed it in my own kitchen. Did I miss it? Or did I see it and call it something else? Because if I missed it, 10 years of clinical work was built on a lie. But if I saw it and chose not to name it, I wasn't incompetent. I was a coward. I didn't know which answer was worse. I cried for about 10 minutes. Then I pulled down the visor mirror, wiped my face with a crumpled Starbucks napkin from the cup holder, and walked back inside. I have been doing that my whole life. Not as a therapist, as a woman. Crying somewhere private, fixing my face, walking back in. I think most women have. My supervision session with Pat was that Thursday. Pat, Dr. Patricia Warren, is 58, silver-haired. Divorced twice. She told me once that her second divorce taught her more about therapy than her entire PhD program. We meet weekly. That Thursday, I sat down in her office and said nothing for 45 seconds. Pat didn't fill the silence. She respects a silence the way most people respect a locked door. Then I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, I said the thing I'd been carrying since Wednesday morning. I'm a fraud, Pat. I sit in that chair every day, and I tell people how to recognize the signs, how to trust their instincts, how to stop rationalizing. And my voice broke. I couldn't see my own husband. What does that make me? Pat took off her glasses, set them on the desk, looked at me the way she looks at me when she's about to say something I'm not ready to hear. Mary, you told me something 3 months ago. Do you remember? After a family dinner, you said, and I'm quoting, "Something felt off tonight, but I can't put my finger on it." Do you remember saying that? I did. I'd forgotten I said it. But I remembered the feeling standing in my kitchen after everyone left, loading the dishwasher, and something sitting wrong in my chest like a meal that wouldn't digest. You weren't projecting? Pat said. You were diagnosing. 3 months ago. You saw it before you had a name for it. You just loved him too much to write it down. She paused. That's not a failure of skill, Mary. That's being human. The worst therapists I've ever known are the ones who never get fooled, because it means they never loved anyone enough to have a blind spot. I stared at her. I wanted to believe it. I wanted it to be true so badly that I could feel it in my teeth. You don't have to be the perfect therapist to leave a bad marriage, she said. You just have to be a good enough mother. She paused. And sometimes the best thing a therapist can do for herself or anyone else is write the discharge papers. I drove home that evening with Pat's words circling in my head like a song I couldn't shake. You saw it. You loved him too much to write it down. Maybe she was right. Maybe I wasn't broken. Maybe I was just human. Then I pulled into the driveway and saw the kitchen light on. Garrett's car was already there early for him. I walked in, and the house smelled like garlic and butter. He'd cooked chicken piccata, my favorite, 2 candles on the table, the ones from our anniversary that we never used because he always forgot. A glass of sparkling cider for me, wine for him. Hey, Mur, he said. And his smile was the one I fell in love with. Not the one I'd seen him give Jessica. The real one. Or what I used to think was the real one. Thought you could use a quiet night. He pulled out my chair, rubbed my shoulders while I sat down, asked about the baby, about my day, about whether I'd thought more about names. He said he liked the name Oliver. It sounds like a good kid, he said, and he put his hand on my belly, and I felt my son kick against his palm, and Garrett laughed and said, he likes it too. And for 20 minutes, I forgot. I forgot the emoji. I forgot the gym bag. I forgot Pat's words, and my own words, and the bathroom floor. For 20 minutes, I sat across from my husband in candlelight and thought, what if I'm wrong? What if this is the version of him that's real? What if Pat is the one who's projecting? Then his phone buzzed. It was on the counter. Face up, he'd started leaving it face up again since the baby conversation. Probably because he sensed I was watching. A small calculation, the kind salespeople make without thinking. He glanced at it. One glance. Maybe 0.3 of a second. His jaw tightened. His eyes changed. Then he looked back at me, and his face was smooth again. Just work, he said. They can wait. 0.3 of a second. In my therapy room, that's called a micro-expression leak. The face tells the truth before the social mask can reassemble. Most people can't see them. I've been trained to see them for a decade, and this time, I didn't file it away. I didn't call it stress. I didn't tell myself I was projecting. This time I thought, that is the last time you will lie to me at this table. That night, after Garrett fell asleep on his back this time, his hand still warm from where he'd touched my belly, I got up. 5 a.m. The house was dark and cold. I sat at the kitchen table with the candle stubs still on it, the plate still in the sink, and I wrote on a piece of paper I folded into quarters. Things I know for sure. I wrote 3 lines. My hand shook on the second one. Things I need. I wrote a lawyer, and then I put the pen down because the word looked too real. Too final. Like writing a prescription you can't take back. I stared at it until my vision blurred. And then I wrote it again. Darker. Because if I was going to do this, the handwriting had to be mine, and it had to be clear. Things I'm afraid of. I filled the entire back of the page. Then I folded the paper into quarters, put it in my wallet, behind my insurance card, and went to make breakfast. Eggs and toast for Garrett. Decaf chai for me. The smile was back on. The performance resumed, but the paper was in my wallet. And that was the first honest thing I'd done for myself in 5 years. I didn't have a plan. I had a folded piece of paper with shaky handwriting and a list of fears longer than my grocery list. But I had the truth, written down, in my own hand, and I couldn't unwrite it. Oliver James Cole was born on a Tuesday in February at 4 47 inches the afternoon, in a delivery room at Atrium Health that smelled like antiseptic, and the lavender oil the nurse had rubbed on my wrists to keep me calm. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, brown eyes like mine, Garrett's chin. For 30 seconds after they placed him on my chest, nothing existed. Not the folded paper in my wallet, not the emoji on the phone, not the cousin who had texted a hard eyes reaction to the group chat announcement 20 minutes after he was born. For 30 seconds, there was only the weight of him damp, furious, unbelievably warm, and the sound he made, which was not quite a cry and not quite a breath, but something in between that I will hear for the rest of my life. "He's perfect," Garrett said, and his voice broke, and I looked up and saw tears on his face that were real. I know real tears. I've watched people fake them in my office for a decade. These were not fake. His hand was shaking when he touched Oliver's head. I almost forgave him in that moment. I want to be honest about that. 30 seconds of holding my son and watching my husband cry. And I almost threw the whole plan away, the plan I barely had, the plan that was still just a folded piece of paper and a word I could barely write. I almost said, maybe this is enough. Maybe love is what you choose to keep, not what you choose to see. But then the nurse asked Garrett to step out so they could stitch me up. And through the gap in the curtain, I watched him pull out his phone in the hallway. He typed something, smiled, put it away. 2 conversations. I knew because I'd seen it before the family group chat. And the other one, the one with the red heart. My son was 11 minutes old. The first 3 days at home were something I wasn't prepared for, not the sleeplessness I knew about the feeding cycles. What I wasn't prepared for was the tenderness. Garrett was good with Oliver. Not performed good, good in the way that mattered. The 3 a.m. way. The dirty diaper way. The walking circles in the living room way. He heated bottles without being asked. He fell asleep in the rocking chair with our son on his chest. And I stood in the doorway watching them breathe together. And I thought, this is what makes it so impossible. If he had been a bad father, it would have been simple. Bad husband, bad father, clean math. But he was a good father and a lying husband. And the distance between those two things was a canyon I didn't know how to cross. For 3 days, I let myself live in the version of us that worked. I put the folded paper deeper in my wallet, behind my driver's license. I told myself, just these 3 days, just let it be real for 3 days. Sharon came on day 4. She arrived with a casserole dish and a monogrammed receiving blanket and the particular energy of a woman who has been waiting her whole life to be a grandmother. She held Oliver like he was made of glass. She kissed his forehead 7 times in the first hour I counted, because I always count, and every single kiss was genuine. That's the thing about Sharon that made everything so much worse. Her love for Oliver was real, undeniable. The way she looked at him had no performance in it. No calculation. It was pure. Everything around it was not. That afternoon, while Garrett ran to the pharmacy for nipple cream and infant Tylenol, Sharon and I sat in the living room. Oliver was asleep in the bassinet. The house was quiet in the way that only houses with sleeping newborns can be. You don't breathe too loudly. You don't set down your mug too hard. You live in the margins of silence. Sharon looked at me over her coffee and said, "Marriage has its seasons, sweetheart." I waited. In therapy, when someone starts a sentence with a metaphor, the real statement is usually in the next 3 sentences. Spring doesn't last forever, she continued. But the women who last, the real women, the strong ones, they're the ones who know how to dress for winter. You understand what I'm saying? I said, I think so. I didn't. Not yet. Or maybe I did, and I was hoping I was wrong. 2 days later, she came back. This time, she brought a pie chess pie, Garrett's favorite, from the bakery on Providence Road. She helped me with laundry while Oliver napped. Then she sat on the edge of my bed, folding burp cloths into perfect squares, and said something she'd clearly been rehearsing. When Garrett's father was young, he was restless. She smoothed a crease in the cloth. I could have made a fuss. Lord knows I wanted to. But my mother told me something I never forgot. She said, "Sharon, a wise woman knows which battles to fight and which ones to outlive." She looked at me. 40 years later, I'm still Mrs. Cole. The other women, I don't even remember their names. The room was very quiet. Oliver made a small sound in his crib, the kind of sound that isn't distress, just existence. A newborn reminding the world, he's there. Garrett's father, I said carefully, was restless. All the Cole men are. It's in the blood. She smiled. The kind of smile that is supposed to be warm but has ice underneath it. But they always come home. That's what matters. She wasn't speaking generally. She wasn't offering marriage advice from a place of wisdom. She was telling me, in the language of Southern women who never say anything directly, that she knew about Jessica, that she had always known, and that the price of staying in this family was my silence. 3 days later, Oliver was 10 days old. She came for the last time before the party. This time, there was no metaphor, no pie, no rehearsed speech. We were in the nursery. I was nursing Oliver. Sharon stood by the window, looking out at the backyard where Garrett used to grill corn on Sundays. She spoke without turning around. Jessica is young. She'll get bored. These things always end. A pause. Men need variety, Meredith. It's just how they're built. But they come home. They always come home if you let them. She turned. So let him. Think about Oliver. I looked down at my son. His eyes were closed. His mouth was working. His hand was curled around my finger with the grip strength of someone who has no idea how complicated the world is. I am thinking about Oliver, I said. Sharon heard agreement. I meant something else entirely. That night, at 3 a.m, I sat in the rocking chair with Oliver against my chest. The house was dark. Garrett was asleep. Somewhere in Greensboro, Jessica was probably asleep too. Somewhere 11 minutes away, Sharon was asleep in her split-level ranch with her church directory on the fridge and her 40-year marriage held together with silence and chess pie. I whispered to my son. Not words he would remember, not words anyone would hear. Just, I'm going to get us out of here. I don't know exactly how yet, but I promise you. Then I reached into the diaper bag, the one I kept next to the rocking chair for night feeds, and pulled out my wallet. Found the folded paper. Opened it. Under things I need, below a lawyer in shaky handwriting, I added one line. Timeline. 6 weeks. 6 weeks? 42 days. I counted them the way I used to count therapy sessions, each one bringing the client closer to the moment they were ready to walk out the door. Have you ever made a promise to someone who couldn't understand the words yet, but meant it more than anything you've ever said to someone who could? I want to tell you that the next 6 weeks were a montage that I moved through them with precision and purpose. Ticking off boxes on a list, building my case like a woman in a legal thriller who drinks black coffee and never cries. That is not what happened. What happened was this. I was 6 days postpartum, bleeding into mesh underwear the hospital gave me, nursing a baby who wanted to eat every 90 minutes, sleeping in chunks so short they barely qualified as naps, and trying to figure out how to leave my husband without losing my mind, my house, or my son. The first 2 weeks, I did almost nothing. I survived. Oliver had his days and nights confused. He'd sleep from noon to 5 and then scream from midnight to 4. Garrett helped. That was the cruel part. He'd take the 4 a.m. shift without complaining, walk circles in the living room with Oliver on his shoulder, singing something tuneless and low, and I'd lie in bed listening to my husband comfort my son and think, How do you leave a man who is a good father and a bad husband at the same time? I didn't have an answer. I just had a folded piece of paper in my wallet that said a lawyer in handwriting that shook. Week 3, I made the call. Rachel Chen, family law attorney, South Tryon Street. I found her at 2 in the morning while Oliver slept on my chest. The first time I dialed, I hung up after 2 rings. The word divorce was too real, too final. I called back the next day and made it through. Rachel was direct. North Carolina is an equitable distribution state. Adultery can impact alimony. Do you have documentation? I'm a therapist, I said. I have observations. Get something tangible. Screenshots, financial records, anything date-stamped. I spent week 4 doing exactly that. Not like a spy, like a sleep-deprived new mother who could only function in 20-minute windows between feedings. I photographed tax returns while Garrett was at work. The first 3 photos were blurry because my hands were shaking and Oliver was fussing in the carrier on my chest. I took them again. I photographed the mortgage statements, the joint account summaries, Garrett's bonus letters. I put them in a folder on my phone labeled Oliver Medical Records because no one would ever open that. Week 5, I found an apartment. Dilworth, 2-bedroom on East Boulevard. 2nd floor above a dry cleaner. Beige carpet. Dripping faucet. $1,200 a month. I stood in the empty living room with Oliver asleep in his carrier and thought, this is what the truth costs. Not a house in Ballantyne with a sage green nursery. A 2nd floor walk-up with a parking lot view. I put down the deposit with money from my pre-marriage savings. My money. Legal. Mine. That was a Tuesday. On Thursday, I almost lost everything. Jessica came by unannounced. She did that, sometimes showed up with coffee and a stuffed animal for Oliver, and the particular energy of a woman who is trying very hard to be a good person and almost succeeding. I was nursing in the living room when she let herself in with the spare key Sharon had given her another thing I hadn't consented to and hadn't fought because I was saving my fights for the one that mattered. "Hey, Mama," she said, and she kissed Oliver's head and handed me an iced latte. And I said thank you and meant it and hated that I meant it. She went to the kitchen to get herself water. And I heard the pause, the tiny silence that happens when someone sees something they weren't supposed to see. "Hey, Mary," she called. My entire body went cold. The folder. Rachel Chen's folder consultation summary, custody overview for Mecklenburg County, a checklist of documents to gather. I'd been reviewing it that morning during Oliver's nap. I'd left it on the counter next to the formula samples and the pediatrician's phone number, and I had not put it away because I had slept 4 hours in the last 2 days, and my brain was running on caffeine and cortisol. "Mary?" I heard her footsteps coming back toward the living room. I had maybe 3 seconds. "Oh, that's for a client," I said, and my voice came out steady, which shocked me. "She's going through a divorce and asked me for a referral." I brought the info home to review. Jessica appeared in the doorway. She looked at me. 2 seconds. Her eyes were clear, searching, and I held her gaze the way I hold a client's gaze when I need them to believe me, open, relaxed. "Nothing to hide. That's nice of you," she said. "Going the extra mile, even on maternity leave. You know me," I said. "Can't turn it off." She sat down, played with Oliver's toes, talked about a coworker's wedding, drank her water, left an hour later with a hug and a, "You're doing amazing, Mary." Seriously? The door closed. I listened to her car pull away. Then I walked to the kitchen, picked up the folder, and slid down the cabinets to the floor. I sat there for 5 minutes with my back against the dishwasher and my hands shaking so badly the papers rattled. Was I really about to lose everything because I forgot to put a folder away? Was I careful enough for this? Was I strong enough? I didn't have answers. I just had a baby who needed feeding and a plan that needed to survive one more week. That night, I checked every surface in the house, moved the documents to a locked phone folder, hid Rachel Chen's business card inside a tampon box under the sink, the one place Garrett would never look. Then, I sat at the kitchen table and opened a notebook. Not the one I used for client notes, a new one, blue cover, 99 cents from the Target dollar section. I wrote, Client, Meredith Cole, age 32. Presenting issue. Husband of 5 years engaged in extramarital affair with client's cousin during client's 3rd trimester. Mother-in-law aware and complicit. Assessment. Client displays resilience, strong maternal attachment, and growing capacity for self-advocacy despite significant postpartum stressors. Treatment plan. Discharge from toxic environment. Pursue legal separation. Rebuild. I closed the notebook. Sat with it for a moment. Writing about myself in 3rd person made it bearable, like I was giving myself permission to be my own client. And my own client, if she had walked into my office and told me this story, would have received one clear recommendation. Leave. The party was set for Saturday. Sharon had planned it. Welcome, baby Oliver, she called it, as if the welcome was hers to give. She'd handled the guest list, the catering, the decorations. She'd invited both families, Garrett's work friends, people from her church, 20-some guests to celebrate the grandson she was already claiming as an extension of herself. My plan was simple. Survive the party, smile, hold Oliver. Then, after the last guest left, sit Garrett down and tell him, show him the folder, give him the papers, take Oliver, drive to Dilworth. That was the plan. Clean, private, dignified. But here's what I've learned from 10 years of therapy. Plans are what you make before life tells you what's actually going to happen. The guests started arriving at 2. I wore a blue dress I'd bought before the pregnancy and altered myself with safety pins because nothing else fit and I didn't have time to shop. I'd done my makeup in the bathroom mirror while Oliver slept concealer under my eyes, mascara that I'd probably cry off before the day was over, lipstick, in a shade called Patience, which I'd bought months ago, and now felt like a joke the universe was playing. 23 people came. Garrett's co-workers, my friends from the practice. Both families. Aunt Caroline drove down from Greensboro. She hugged me at the door and said, "Let me see that grandson." And I handed Oliver over and watched her face do the thing that faces do when they hold a new baby for the first time. Open, unguarded, full. Jessica arrived early to help set up. She arranged flowers on the dining table, peonies, my favorite, because she remembered she wore a yellow sundress and she looked beautiful, and she hugged me like she meant it, and I let her because I had become very good at letting people touch me without flinching. Garrett moved through the room the way he always did, effortless, magnetic. He shook hands, poured drinks, told the story of Oliver's birth with the perfect ratio of humor and emotion. Mary was incredible, he told his colleague Brad. I was useless. She did everything. Brad's wife laughed. Garrett put his arm around me. I smiled. The envelope was in my diaper bag, next to the wipes and the burp cloths and the spare onesie, manila. Thin. The heaviest thing I have ever carried. For the first hour, the plan held. Survive the party. Wait. Tell him tonight. Then came the 3 seconds that almost changed everything. It was around 3:30. The living room was full. Someone had put on soft music. Oliver had been passed around like a warm loaf of bread. Aunts, uncles, co-workers, Sharon's church friend Donna, who smelled like Estee Lauder and called every baby precious. He'd finally ended up back with Garrett, who was standing by the window with Oliver against his chest. Oliver was awake. His eyes were open, unfocused, trying to make sense of the light. Garrett was looking down at him. and his face, I watched it from across the room, was unguarded. No charm, no performance, just a man looking at his son with something that might have been wonder, and might have been grief, and might have been both at the same time. Oliver reached up. His tiny hand found Garrett's jaw. His fingers curled against the stubble there, and Garrett closed his eyes. 3 seconds. I stood by the kitchen doorway holding a glass of sparkling cider I hadn't sipped. And I thought, maybe I could live with this. Maybe Sharon is right. A wise woman outlives it. He's a good father. Look at them. Look at what Oliver has. 2 parents. A home. A family that shows up with casseroles and church friends and peonies. What am I about to take from my son? 3 seconds. The longest of my life. Then Sharon's voice cut through the room. She was standing near the fireplace with Aunt Caroline, holding a glass of white wine. And she was doing what Sharon does best, narrating, performing the version of reality she had decided was true. "Isn't this just wonderful?" she said, loud enough for half the room to hear. "The whole family, together. Garrett is such a devoted father, you can just see it, can't you?" She gestured toward Garrett and Oliver by the window. Then she turned and smiled at Jessica, who was refilling the chip bowl nearby. And Jessica. Lord, I don't know what Mary would have done without her. These past few months, she was here nearly every day during the pregnancy. Every single day. That's family. She said it with pride. With ownership. Like she was presenting her collection, the devoted son, the helpful cousin, the compliant wife, the grandson who tied it all together. A system she had built and maintained with chess pie and Bible study and carefully timed advice about wise women and winter. Aunt Caroline smiled politely. "Jessica's always been a sweet girl." "The sweetest," Sharon said. And then she looked at me across the room, over the heads of 23 people who were eating finger sandwiches and didn't know anything, and she gave me a look. Not hostile. Worse. Satisfied. The look of a woman who believes she has arranged the world exactly the way she wants it, and the pieces have all agreed to stay. Something in me shifted. Not broke, I was past breaking. This was different. This was the sound of a lock turning, a door opening that could not be closed again. I set down the cider, walked to the diaper bag, took out the envelope. I had not planned to do this here. I want you to understand that. The plan was tonight. The plan was private. The plan was dignified. But I had just watched my mother-in-law stand in my living room and describe the woman who was sleeping with my husband as family and helpful and sweet while holding a glass of wine I paid for, in a house I was still making mortgage payments on, at a party she threw for a grandson she intended to keep by keeping me silent. And I couldn't. I just couldn't do it for one more hour. I didn't walk to the center of the room. I didn't tap a glass. I stood up from where I was sitting, near the dining table, and I spoke in a voice that was not the voice I'd planned. Not calm. Not clinical. Not the therapist voice that I'd been practicing in my head for 6 weeks. My voice shook, and I let it. I want to thank everyone for being here for Oliver. He's the best thing in my life. A few people smiled. Garrett looked up from across the room. I need to say something because I can't pretend anymore. My son deserves a mother who tells the truth. So here it is. The room didn't go silent the way it does in movies. A few people kept talking. Someone laughed at something near the kitchen, and then stopped when they noticed my face. Garrett has been having an affair with Jessica. It started during my pregnancy. Now the room was quiet, but not clean quiet. Messy quiet, the kind of quiet that has coughing in it. And someone setting down a plate too hard. And a nervous laugh from someone who thinks it might be a joke. "I wasn't planning to say this here," I said. "I was going to wait until tonight. But I just listened to my mother-in-law describe the woman who is sleeping with my husband as helpful while holding my son. And I can't carry this for one more hour. I'm done. Garrett moved toward me. Mary, this isn't. Can we talk about this? We could have, I said. Any time in the last 7 months, you chose not to. Jessica hadn't moved from the chip bowl. Her face was white. She was looking at the floor. Aunt Caroline was looking at Sharon. Did you know about this? Sharon's mouth opened. Closed. Her face was doing something I had never seen it do. Losing its shape. The southern composure cracking like old paint. It's not Caroline. You don't understand how men need. She stopped, swallowed. Then it came out. The thing she had been saying to me in private for weeks. The thing she had dressed up in metaphors and mother-in-law wisdom. Stripped bare now. Because she was panicking. Men need variety, Caroline. It's not. It's biology. And if Mary had been more what? Aunt Caroline's voice was low. Dangerous. More willing to look the other way? Like you did for 40 years? Sharon had no answer. For the first time in my life, I watched my mother-in-law stand in a room full of people with absolutely nothing to say. I picked up Oliver from Garrett's arms. Garrett didn't resist. He was frozen, his mouth half open, his hand still reaching for a son who was no longer there. Sharon reached toward us instinct, not strategy, and I stepped back. Please don't, I said. Quiet. Not cruel. Just done. I put the envelope on the coffee table. Divorce papers. Custody filing. Rachel Chen's contact information on a post-it, stuck to the front. I picked up the diaper bag, put it over my shoulder, held Oliver against my chest with both hands. He was warm. He was quiet. He didn't know. I walked to the door. I'm not going to stand here and give a speech, I said, to no one and to everyone. I just needed the truth to be said out loud, in a room full of witnesses, so that no one can rewrite it later. I opened the door. March and Charlotte cool, not cold. The azaleas on the front walk were just starting to bloom. I noticed that because your brain notices stupid things when the rest of you is falling apart. I put Oliver in his car seat. My hands were shaking so badly it took me 3 tries to click the buckle. I got in the driver's seat, put my hands on the wheel, sat there, 90 seconds. I sat in that driveway for 90 seconds before I could turn the key. I was not brave. I was not fierce. I was a 32-year-old woman in a blue dress held together with safety pins, sitting in a Honda CR-V that still smelled like the lavender air freshener Garrett had hung from the mirror last month, shaking so hard the rearview mirror vibrated. But my son was in the back seat. And the truth was in that living room. And there was nothing left inside that house that belonged to me. I turned the key, backed out of the driveway, did not look at the house, drove. Garrett called 47 times in the first 3 days. I know because I counted. Old habit. The voicemail started angry, then confused, then bargaining. By day 2, he was crying the real kind, the kind I'd seen at Oliver's birth, and hearing it through my phone speaker in the Dilworth apartment at 11 p.m., while Oliver slept in the next room was one of the hardest things I've done. Not because I wanted to go back, because grief sounds the same whether you caused it or not, and my therapist brain couldn't stop diagnosing him even now. I didn't call back. On day 3, he sent a long text, the kind that takes 20 minutes to write and a lifetime to mean, I know I messed up. I still love you. I love Oliver. Can we at least try therapy? The irony almost made me laugh. Almost. He wanted therapy. From me. For us. I stared at that message for a long time. And then I closed my phone and went to heat a bottle. Because Oliver didn't care about irony. He cared about being fed. The system collapsed, the way systems do when the person holding them together steps out. Sharon tried to rally the church network calls to friends, tearful conversations at Wednesday Bible study about how her daughter-in-law had made a scene and taken the baby. But Aunt Caroline got there first. My Aunt Jessica's mother called Sharon directly. I wasn't on the call. But my mother told me afterward that Caroline said one sentence and then hung up. You knew my daughter was destroying my niece's marriage, and you coached her through it. Sharon denied it. Of course she did. But denial requires a consistent story, and the three of them couldn't agree on one. Garrett told his friends. Jessica came on to him. Jessica told Aunt Caroline that Garrett said his marriage was already over. Sharon told her church group that I was emotionally unstable from the pregnancy. 3 different versions. 3 people who had been perfectly coordinated when I was the one absorbing the damage. Now spinning apart because there was no one left to absorb it. Jessica wasn't cut off immediately. That's the part people don't tell you about family betrayal. It doesn't resolve cleanly. Some relatives held back, waiting for the full story. Aunt Caroline was furious but also ashamed because Jessica was her daughter, and shame makes people slow. A few of Garrett's co-workers who'd been at the party stopped making eye contact with him at work, but nobody said anything directly. The truth moved through both families. The way weather moves, you could see it coming, but you couldn't control where it landed. Custody was not easy. I need you to know that. Rachel Chen had warned me. He'll fight. Not because he thinks he'll win because someone will tell him to. She was right. Sharon told Garrett that if he didn't contest custody, he'd never see Oliver again. So he filed. And for 2 months, I lived with the low hum of legal uncertainty, court dates, mediations, parenting plan negotiations. Did I do the right thing? Would Oliver be better off with 2 parents under one roof? Even a broken one? Was I selfish? I asked myself those questions at 3 a.m. while heating bottles. I never found clean answers. I just found the next morning. Pat said something during that time that I held onto like a handrail. The court doesn't care who's louder, Mary. They care who showed up at 3 a.m. She was right. In the end, the judge looked at who had attended every prenatal appointment, who had primary caregiving documentation, who had a stable residence and a therapist's income and a pediatrician who knew her by first name, and who had been at a hotel with his wife's cousin during the 3rd trimester. I got primary custody. Garrett got visitation every other weekend, Wednesday evenings. Sharon filed for grandparent visitation rights. The court denied it. In North Carolina, grandparents don't have standing if the custodial parent objects. I objected. The apartment on East Boulevard was small. The faucet dripped. The garbage truck came at 6 every morning, and Oliver screamed every single time like it was a personal insult. The carpet was still beige. The bedroom window still faced the parking lot, but it was mine. The lease had my name on it. The electricity bill had my name on it. The silence at 9 p.m. after Oliver fell asleep, that was mine too. I went back to work part-time in April. My first session back, I sat in my chair and looked at the client across from me, a woman in her 40s, going through a separation, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not confidence, not wisdom, just the quiet recognition that I still knew how to listen. That the thing I had doubted most about myself, my ability to see people clearly, had survived. I was still a therapist. I was just one who knew something new, that therapists are also people. And people have blind spots shaped exactly like the ones they love. Pat called on a Thursday evening. I was sitting on the living room floor eating pad thai from a carton, the only way to eat pad thai. In my opinion, while Oliver slept in his crib, with the white noise machine set to ocean waves. How's the new place? Small. The faucet drips. Oliver has a personal vendetta against the garbage truck. Sounds real. It is. I looked around the apartment, the IKEA bookshelf I'd assembled, wrong, and then reassembled at midnight. The framed photo of Oliver on the kitchen counter, the therapy books stacked on the floor because I hadn't bought a second bookshelf yet. For the first time in a long time, everything around me is real. That night, after Pat hung up, I did 2 things. First, I picked up my phone. Settings. Emergency contacts. I deleted Garrett Cole. In the blank field, I typed Patricia Warren. One tap. The first honest edit I'd made to my own life in 5 years. Then I opened the blue notebook, the 99-cent one from Target. The case note I'd written about myself the night before the party. I read it once. Then I picked up a pen and added one final line at the bottom. Final note. Client discharged successfully. Prognosis hopeful. I closed the notebook. Set it on the shelf next to the therapy books. Not hidden, not burned, not thrown away. Just placed down. The way you place something you no longer need to carry. I thought about Jessica. About that Thursday night at the kitchen table. Months ago, when she'd had 2 glasses of wine and looked at me and said, "Mary, you deserve someone who you deserve better than." She stopped. I thought she was being sweet. I know now she was being almost honest. Almost. She saw the edge of the truth and stepped back from it, and that more than the affair, more than the lies, more than the red heart emoji at 2 a.m, was the part that would take the longest to forgive. Not Garrett. Garrett was a liar, and liars lie. But Jessica sat across from me, held my hand, and almost told me the truth, and then chose not to. That's not weakness. That's a decision. I used to believe that if you understood a relationship well enough, you could save it. I was wrong. Some relationships were never real enough to save, and the bravest thing I did was not standing in that living room, or filing those papers, or driving away with my son in the back seat while my hands shook so badly I couldn't find the ignition. The bravest thing I did was sitting on a bathroom floor at 2 a.m, 8 months pregnant, and whispering to no one. I already knew. If you have ever held a truth in your chest like a stone and pretended it was just heartburn, if you have ever smiled at a dinner table while something inside you was quietly dying, then you understand. You don't need permission to believe what your own eyes told you. You just need someone to say, "You saw it. You were right. And you are allowed to leave."